All right, so we actually have the inflation numbers out right now, just as we were talking. These numbers were released. Ryan, should we start with the Republican spin? Because I know we have an element of that. It's Rick Santelli, of course, that was already clipped and posted by the official Republican Party X account. Let's roll this clip.
Right now, for the July Consumer Price Index, headline number coming in as expected, up 0.2%. Up 0.2% on headline number follows yet unrevised down 0.1. So we went from basically the weakest, the biggest negative month-over-month change, a positive in CPI since COVID for 2020. And now we're at a level that we haven't seen really since April, when we were up at 0.3. If you look at ex-food and energy, exactly as expected as well, up 0.2. The issue is, of course, it's following 0.1, which, just like the last number, was comping towards the first several months of COVID.
Okay, so that's the Republican spin immediately upon the numbers being released. But Ryan, let's get into some of these numbers and actually what they are, because it's the first year over year being less than 3% of an inflation increase, the CPI here, first year over year since March of 2021. So year over year, the first time that it hasn't been over 3% or higher since March of 2021, right in the heat of the pandemic. How do you think Wall Street's going to react to this? Because they were, as the New York Times put it, quote, on edge ahead of the CPI being released, which is always the case.
Yeah, and it beats expectations by a little bit.
Yeah.
Last month also beat expectations by a little bit, so that's two months in a row. The big question that Wall Street is going to have, and that all of us are also going to have, because it matters to us as well, is whether there will be a rate cut next month from the Federal Reserve. But this number seems to move that question to what kind of rate cut we're going to have. Is it going to be a 1/4 point, which is the kind of normal state of affairs for the Fed to cut, or is it going to be a 1/2 point cut? And this pushes the possibility of a 1/2 point rate cut closer to happening. I think rates are the Fed sets its current rate at, I think, 5.3%.
Yeah.
But a half point cut would send a dramatic signal that there's going to be more money flowing into the economy, that loans are going to be easier to get, and then you will start to see. You're already seeing interest rates coming down, interestingly, over the last several months, like 30-year mortgage rates coming down. This would send mortgage rates significantly down, which means, $500 to $1,000 or more off of a mortgage payment for people who either refinance or purchase at the exact same price.
Do you think that potential?
Which is huge.
Do you think the potential rate cut's going to depend on the jobs report, early September? It's like September 6th.
That'll play a role. Okay. And that'll probably be soft, which means that they will probably not have added as many jobs, as they had in previous months. And that then will further induce the Fed to cut rates. Now, the politics of this are such that Trump is probably going to spend the next several weeks browbeating the Fed not to cut rates. He has said that he wanted a market crash, and he wants no Fed rate cuts, like in order to help his reelection campaign. And it's delightful for us as political reporters that he just says the stuff out loud.
Yeah, no, but really.
That's what all candidates who are opposing the incumbent want, but he just says it out loud.
You don't need any truth serum. Like, we never needed MK Ultra, we just needed Trump.
He just says it.
It's all we ever needed.
Just tweets it out.
Yeah.
He got his market crash, but then it immediately kind of rebounded over the next several days. And so that market crash probably woke up the Fed a little bit. The reporting around Powell's thinking on this, the Fed chair, is that he doesn't want the Fed to appear political by coming in it would be, Trump will accuse him of being political and accuse him of kind of biasing the electoral results towards Democrats. If Powell thinks that Democrats are going to win anyway, that kind of gives him more reason. Obviously, everybody is political. So if when it was Trump versus Biden, and it looked like Trump was going to win like New Mexico and Minnesota, and you're Powell, then you're like, you know what? I'm not going to tick this guy off. But if it looks like Trump's going to lose anyway, and you are risking this soft landing that you've been going for, which would be your legacy. Like if he can oversee this spike in inflation around the pandemic, and then bring inflation back down to the 2% range, while keeping unemployment at the 3 to 4% range, and not going into recession, that would be a legacy for a Fed chair that he would go around and give speeches about, and people would write books about him, and
get some money for those speeches too.
And if he holds rates too high for too long, he risks sending the economy spiraling into a recession, which then undermines his whole legacy. But what's interesting about the GOP spin that we played at the top is that that's also true in some ways. It's a case where what both sides are saying is true. So you want to run through some of this?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's get into that, because in this CPI, shelter costs are still going up. So it's a 0.5%, but that's still significant because that's one place that is absolutely crushing people. We'll get into that in a moment. New and used cars are going down. That has been a hugely significant expense for a lot of families. Food prices still going up in the CPI. Now, if we put this element up on the screen, it is a long Wall Street Journal report on basically picking apart where people are still getting hit really hard from inflation. And some of these numbers are truly insane. Car insurance is still up like 40%. Childcare, water, sewer, trash costs, some of these like very essential services still up. Rent and electricity up 10%. So consumer prices overall since June of 2022 are up 6%. Car insurance, I think I already said that one, 40%. Shelter costs are, rent, I already mentioned that, but shelter overall, it's another metric that they measure separately, still really high. There are things that have gone down. Cable, shampoo, there are some kind of random places where people have seen cooling, and that's all true. But if you can imagine across the board, I mean, some of these, depending on how people live and where they live, it's a little bit uneven. Some of that matters, and if you're in a city like childcare, super, super high in cities right now, not going down. Doesn't show any signs of going down. So it's being experienced differently in different pockets of the country, but some of these things like 40% increase in car insurance prices, almost everybody is feeling that. I mean, almost everybody's feeling that. Increases in essential services, those are things that everybody is feeling, and they're not showing any signs of going down at all. It's not a good sign that the shelter costs are still increasing, even if it's a slowed rate of increase.
Right. So you look at these numbers and you have the answer to the question of, why do we have a quote unquote good economy, which is low unemployment and low inflation,
good market,
and a booming stock market, yet my life is miserable? Like how on earth are all of those things true? And the reason that they're true is what everybody kind of intuitively gets. Rent and housing is through the roof since the pandemic. Energy costs, your power bill, are through the roof, and car insurance. And food prices have gone up and haven't come down. So like even though they're no longer going up, they're up. And wages have kept up with food prices, but if you throw in rent and you throw in the car insurance, you throw in the electric bill, you're way behind from what you used to be. And so just looking at some of the BLS numbers from this month, so transportation services, which includes car insurance, Ubers and Lyfts and cabs and all that stuff are way up, still rolling at 8.8%, which is rough. And that is partly because used cars and trucks and new vehicles were so significantly up. Like you said, they're now coming down. So used cars and trucks are down 10.9% year over year, but that's because they went up.
They were up really high.
A massive number. The more expensive new and used cars are, the more expensive it is to replace them, the more expensive your insurance is. Now, a bunch of people who watch this show were mad at me for saying that climate change is one of the drivers of why auto insurance has gone up so much in the last couple of years. And this Wall Street Journal article just confirms that once again. Insurance, and maybe the insurance companies are lying and their data is completely faked and it's fake news. But they say that storms and crazy weather have been significant drivers in recent years of damage to vehicles and as a result of higher insurance rates. And you can go ahead and say that maybe the storms and all the crazy weather has nothing to do with climate change. But that's not what climate scientists believe. And the numbers are showing what they're showing. I think the rise of electric vehicles playing a role here too. Like you get in a car accident with an electric vehicle, that sucker's totaled a lot faster. Plus, you cannot underrate the role of what Kia and Hyundai of selling millions of cars that are easy to steal. Like this is an undertold story.
Okay, yes, but then also the cities that are wildly over permissive of the stealing of those cars.
That's fine, but if you create cars, if you produce cars,
you should, yes,
that you could just walk into and drive away.
Yes, they should not have done that.
And refuse to stop doing that after it's called to your attention. Like the number of car thefts that are directly connected to Kia and Hyundai making cars that are easy to steal.
But mostly to the people thieving. First and foremost, connected to the people stealing the cars that are easy to steal.
Right, but if you make it harder to steal,
it's a deterrent, no question about it. No question about it.
Like you tighten that up, and there are going to be fewer cars stolen. But it's a complete and so the other spiraling effect here is as car insurance gets more expensive, fewer people acquire it, even if the law says you're supposed to have it. What does that do? That drives up the cost of insurance for people who do have the insurance, because now, if you get into a car accident, the chances that you hit somebody that doesn't have insurance have gone up.
Yeah.
And so, like at some point, it feels like we're going to need a public option here, like
the car insurance public option.
Yes, like because this is going the wrong direction. Because every percentage increase that you have in car insurance costs is going to mean a higher percentage of people without car insurance.
We should do a whole segment on that.
Which then drives car insurance prices higher.
That's interesting. We should do a whole segment on that someday.
So you're paying, and if you're not going to solve climate change, then the public option for car insurance. This is before we get to property insurance, flood insurance, which I don't think anybody's going to quibble with me about that being related to climate change.
Not even Trump, who in his conversation with Elon Musk said, listen, maybe it'll create more oceanfront property for me.
It's not happening, but it'll create more oceanfront property.
Yeah, but I mean, so it's to your point about the kind of duality here that the Republican spin, I probably shouldn't have even been laughing and mocking the Republican spin because it is tackling something really real. There's the duality of that and the good news. So it's like there's good news, there's bad news, but overall, still just bad news for everybody because there's no sign like, well, it's I guess good that we're below 3% for the first time year over year since March of 2021. Yeah, I guess that's good news. On the other hand, it's hard to see this kind of, what's the best way to put it, the Titanic being turned around here because even these good things, we don't have an answer to the housing costs. And there's an interesting quote in the Journal article where a guy says, yeah, gas prices are cheaper, but I'm not feeling it in my budget because the other things have gone up, basically. Gas prices can go down, cable prices can go down, which I honestly don't even believe. I don't know how they're getting that cable number.
Well, I think because cable prices went so through the roof because of the pandemic.
That's true. That's true. Like cars and
yeah, because everybody was at home. But people, the Wall Street Journal article is good. People should read it. And you can, by the way, you can just take the Journal article and go to not that I would tell anybody to do this because maybe it's illegal to tell them, but it is possible to go to archive.is and put the Wall Street Journal link in there. And
you would never.
I would never suggest such a thing. But if you do that, you can find an archived version that goes around the paywall.
But we don't recommend it.
Well, absolutely. That'd be terrible.
Yeah.
Who would ever do such a thing? Not our viewers.
And don't do it to Dropsite either.
Well, Dropsite, everything's free there.
That's right.
So.
Charitable man.
That's right. The only thing you get if you subscribe is you can comment.
That's cool.
And the goal of that is actually just so we don't have to moderate the comment section. Because we figure if somebody's paying to subscribe, that they're not going to be a terrible troll in the comments.
Well, as we learned at the Federalist,
that'd be a weird way to spend your money, but
it's a good way to do it because as we learned at the Federalist a few years ago, they will come after you if people say crazy things in your comments and demonetize you, threaten to demonetize you in Google Ads, which basically means you can't run a news business.
Do not do that to
Internet business, yes. So good. That is a great way to do comments.
But the good news, if we're going to finish it on that, is if the Fed does lower interest rates, and that brings down the price of mortgages, then that can help with rent and housing costs.
Yeah.
Like that is a path out of this. And if you can make it easier to borrow money, you can build more housing. Now you have to deal with the NIMBY problem.
But then obviously there's prices elsewhere that get affected by that too, which is why the jobs report is probably pretty important. The decision.
Right. The concern is that if you lower interest rates, the economy is going to grow, wages will grow, and wages will produce inflation. As Powell has said, the connection between wage growth and inflation is much more tenuous than it used to be in the 1960s, partly because there aren't unions. Like back in the 60s, you had unions who had contracts and made up like 40% of the workforce that they would get raises based on the cost of living increase that the federal government produced through these numbers. And so then the federal government would say, well, cost of living was 7%. Unions would get an 8% raise, and then that would drive 8% the next year, and then unions would get 9%. So it had this like feedback effect, which thanks to neoliberalism breaking labor unions, we don't have that feedback effect anymore. So now it actually seems like interest rates play a more significant role. High interest rates play a more significant role in driving prices up and costing people more than they do in slowing or growing the economy.
Interesting.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. The journal article is worth your time if you're able to read it.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.